Kayamika had always been the kind of woman who carried the weight of her family on her shoulders without complaining. Working long shifts as a nurse in Enugu, she often came home exhausted, but she never let tiredness stop her from checking in on her siblings or making sure everyone was okay. Her life wasn't easy, but she believed family came before everything else. Her older brother Obinna was the opposite of her. He was handsome, smooth-talking, and had a charm that could win people over in minutes. But behind that charm was a reckless streak. He made promises he rarely kept, jumped into risky ventures, and lived like tomorrow would always sort itself out. Still, Kayamika never stopped defending him. Whenever others shook their heads at his mistakes, she reminded them, "He's my brother. Blood is blood." Deep down, she believed it was her duty to hold the family together, no matter how heavy the load. Obinna had always liked living big, chasing quick money and showing off like life was a party that would never end. At first, it was just small bets here and there, a little gambling with friends, and then a few business ventures he swore would make him rich overnight. But one loss led to another, and before he knew it, the numbers were no longer small. He had borrowed, doubled down, and borrowed again until the debt piled up like a mountain he couldn't climb. By the time reality hit him, he owed a terrifying $250,000. The men he borrowed from were not the kind of people you could smile your way past. They weren't bankers or patient investors. They were men with scars on their faces and threats in their voices. At first, Obinna thought he could manage them by time, talk his way out like he always did. But soon, the knocks on his door grew harder, the warnings sharper. His phone buzzed late at night with promises that if he didn't pay, he would pay with something far worse than money. Still, Obinna told no one, not even Kayamika. He walked around with his usual grin, keeping the storm inside him hidden. But every day the fear grew, eating him alive. The debt wasn't just numbers anymore. It was a shadow chasing him, and he knew it was only a matter of time before the whole family would feel its weight. One evening, just as Kayamika was getting home from a long hospital shift, she heard frantic knocking on her door. When she opened it, Obinna stood there, eyes red, his hands trembling. She had never seen him like that before. The charming, confident brother she knew was gone. In his place was a broken man, shaking as though the ground beneath him was about to give way. "Kayamika, please," he whispered, then dropped to his knees before she could even ask what was wrong. His tears fell freely as he clutched her hands. "They will kill me if I don't pay them back. You're the only one who can save me." At first she thought he was exaggerating, but then he poured it all out, the failed businesses, the gambling, the endless loans. The $250,000 debt was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. Her chest tightened as he spoke, but what shook her more was the way he held on to her like a drowning man. "I swear this will change me," he begged. "If you help me now, I will never forget it. I'll respect you the way I should have all along. You're my sister, my only hope." Kayamika felt her heart twist. This was the brother she had always protected. The same boy she once tied wrappers around when he fell sick as a child. How could she turn her back now when his life was on the line? Kayamika didn't sleep that night. She sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing Obinna's cries replay in her head. Every word, "They will kill me, you're my only hope," burned into her chest. By morning, she had made her decision. If saving him meant emptying herself, then so be it. Family came first. She walked to the bank and cleared out the savings she had been keeping for years. That money was supposed to be for her dream, opening a small clinic of her own, but dreams could wait. Next, she took off her gold earrings and bracelets, gifts from her late mother, and sold them at a pawn shop. The hardest step was signing the papers to mortgage her mother's land, the only piece of inheritance she had left. As the pen touched the paper, her hands shook, but she told herself it was worth it. With all the money gathered, she went with Obinna to meet the loan sharks. They counted the cash, eyeing her like hunters finally fed. The tension in the air melted only when the last note was dropped on the table. For the first time in weeks, Obinna stood tall again. Kayamika exhaled deeply, her heart lighter. She believed she had just rescued her brother from death and protected the family's name from shame. Though her pockets were empty, she walked away proud, telling herself, "This is what love looks like. This is what a sister does." That night, Obinna was a different man. He came into the kitchen humming, smiling from ear to ear, and for once, His eyes carried no fear. He insisted on cooking, though everyone knew he wasn't much of a cook. Still, he set the table, brought out soft drinks, and even managed to whip up a simple pot of jollof rice. "Tonight we celebrate," he said, raising his glass with a grin that lit up the room. Kayamika sat quietly, watching him laugh and joke like old times. It warmed her heart to see him free of the darkness that had been hanging over him. When he stood up to thank her, calling her my sister, my savior, my angel, her eyes watered. He promised he would never forget what she did for him. Everyone in the room clapped and cheered, and for a moment, it felt like the family bond was stronger than ever. As she ate, Kayamika felt a deep sense of peace. Yes, she had sacrificed everything. But looking at Obina's happy face, she told herself it was worth it. She believed she had done the right thing, that she had protected her brother and saved the family's honor. She smiled to herself and thought, maybe this is the beginning of a better Obina. Maybe this time he will finally change. That night she went to bed proud, her heart full, convinced her sacrifice had meaning. The next morning, Kayamika woke up expecting to see her brother still in high spirits after the little celebration. Instead, she found Obina sitting in the living room, his face hard, his voice sharp. Without greeting her, he looked straight at her and said, "Kayamika, it's time for you to pack your things. You've stayed here long enough. This is my house." First she thought he was joking. She even smiled a little, waiting for him to laugh it off. But he didn't. His tone was cold, his eyes empty of the warmth he had shown just hours before. "You've overstayed your welcome," he repeated, as if she were some stranger who had been squatting in his home. The words hit her like a slap. Kayamika stood frozen, her heart racing. Just yesterday, she had given away every coin she had, even mortgaged their late mother's land to save his life. And now, the same brother she had nearly destroyed herself for was discarding her like she meant nothing. Her lips trembled but no words came out. She felt hollow, betrayed in a way she had never imagined. Everything, the savings, the jewelry, the land, her pride, gone, and this was her reward. Obina didn't even look guilty. As she turned slowly toward her room, her chest heavy, one thought echoed in her mind. He used me, and now he's thrown me away. By the time Kayamika stepped outside with her 2 small bags, the sun had barely risen, but a small crowd of neighbors had already gathered, drawn by Obina's loud voice. They watched quietly as she walked down the dusty street, her head held high though her heart felt shattered. The house that had once felt like a safe place now seemed like a cage she had been pushed out of. Obina stood at the doorway, smiling casually, as if nothing had happened. She was too controlling, he told anyone who asked, shrugging as if it explained everything. Had to go. Couldn't stay here anymore. Whispers ran through the neighbors. Some shook their heads, some murmured sympathy, but no one knew the truth. They didn't see the nights Kayamika spent working double shifts to support him, or the tears she had shed for his mistakes. Kayamika kept walking, the small weight of her bags a stark reminder of everything she had lost. Her friends avoided her gaze, unsure of what to say, and strangers looked at her with quiet judgment. Every step felt like humiliation, the very street she had grown up on turning into a stage for her disgrace. Yet, deep inside, a small spark of resolve flickered. Even as her pride was trampled and her kindness twisted into a story of control, she reminded herself that her worth wasn't measured by the lies of someone who had betrayed her. She would survive this. She had to. Kayamika's new room in Onitsha was tiny, barely enough space for a bed, a small table and a chair. The walls were bare, the floor cold, and the rent ate most of the little money she had left. Every morning, she woke up to the sound of the busy street outside, wondering how she would manage the day. Food was a struggle. Sometimes she skipped meals just to keep the lights on and pay for water. She spent hours thinking about everything she had lost, the house, her savings, her mother's land, and the hardest part was knowing it had all been for someone who didn't care. She sat on the edge of the bed, head in her hands, and the tears finally came. She let them fall freely, shaking as the weight of betrayal pressed down on her. "Why does being kind always cost me everything?" she whispered to herself, the words barely audible over the hum of the city outside. Kayamika thought about Obina, the brother she had saved, the brother who had thrown her out and spread lies about her. Her heart ached, and anger mixed with despair. Yet even in that tiny, lonely room, Somewhere under the exhaustion and the heartbreak, a small part of her refused to give up. She wiped her tears, took a shaky breath, and tried to remind herself that she was still alive. If she could survive this, maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to rebuild. One evening, as Kayamika sat in her tiny room staring at the empty walls, she remembered a flyer she had seen months ago about a healthcare grant in Ghana. It was a long shot, but something inside her whispered that this could be her chance to turn things around. She spent the night filling out the application, writing about her experiences as a nurse, her struggles, and her dream of opening a clinic that could serve people who didn't have access to proper healthcare. Every word came straight from her heart. Weeks later, she received a call. The voice on the other end sounded impressed, almost surprised. They told her that her honesty, her dedication, and her vision had stood out among hundreds of applicants. They offered her full sponsorship, not just to study, but to start a private health clinic after completing her training. Kayamika couldn't believe it. Her hands shook, and tears of relief filled her eyes. For the first time in months, hope replaced the weight of despair. She could see a path forward, a way to rebuild her life and make a real difference. The tiny room in Onitsha no longer felt like a trap. It was the place where she had found her second chance. Kayamika smiled through the tears, feeling a spark of determination. After all she had lost, this was proof that kindness, hard work, and resilience could still lead to something better. The future, she realized, might finally be hers to shape. Kayamika threw herself into her work with a focus she had never known before. Every day at the clinic, she treated patients with care and attention, listening to their worries and offering solutions that went beyond just medicine. Word spread quickly about the young Nigerian nurse who treated everyone with dignity, whether they could pay or not. Slowly, the clinic began to grow. She hired young nurses who shared her vision, mentoring them as she had once been mentored. Together, they built a team that was skilled, compassionate, and committed. Patients started coming from neighboring towns, trusting Kayamika not just for treatment, but for the honesty and warmth she showed them. Her reputation became a beacon for those who had long struggled to find reliable healthcare. Even in the busiest days, Kayamika never lost her personal touch. She remembered every patient's name, checked on them after treatment, and made sure her staff did the same. Local communities began to respect her not just as a nurse, but as someone who had risen from hardship and built something meaningful with her own hands. What started as a tiny clinic in a foreign city became one of the best in the region. Kayamika's hard work, patience, and integrity transformed lives every day, and she finally felt the satisfaction of knowing that her sacrifices had not been in vain. From the depths of betrayal and loss, she had risen, proving that dedication and heart could turn even the darkest moments into something extraordinary. Obinna thought he had learned his lesson after Kayamika had saved him, but old habits die hard. The moment the debt was cleared, he threw himself back into the lifestyle he loved: late nights, loud parties, and careless spending. Friends flocked to him, impressed by his charm and apparent success, and for a while it seemed like he was on top of the world. He didn't notice the money slipping through his fingers, or maybe he didn't care. Within a year, the fortune he had inherited from Kayamika's sacrifices was gone. The parties ended, the friends disappeared, and the bills began piling up. Obinna's reckless choices had brought him back to the same dangerous place he had once begged to escape. Then the familiar knock came again: the loan sharks. Their patience was gone, replaced with threats sharper than before. But this time, there was no Kayamika to step in, no sister to pay his way out of trouble. He realized, too late, that his charm and promises could not save him now. Alone with no one to bail him out, Obinna felt the weight of his mistakes crash down. For the first time, the consequences of his choices were real, harsh, and unavoidable. The world he had thought he owned was slipping through his fingers, and he had no one to blame but himself. The brother who had once relied on Kayamika's love and sacrifices was now left to face the chaos he had created. Obinna's luck ran out completely. After blowing through the money he had wasted, he turned to new loans, hoping he could fix things the same way he always had. But this time there was no one to rescue him. The interest piled up, payments were missed, and soon the family house, the very place Kayamika had once called home and sacrificed so much to protect, was taken from him. He watched helplessly as the bank took over, the walls that had held so many memories slipping from his grasp. His so-called friends, the ones who had laughed with him at parties and shared in his fun, disappeared one by one. Calls went unanswered, visits stopped, and the laughter that had once surrounded him turned into cold silence. He was left completely alone, with nothing but mounting debts and the bitter taste of regret. Desperation set in quickly. Obinna wandered the streets, wondering how he had gone from charm and wealth to a man with nothing. Every knock on the door felt like a threat, every phone call a warning. He realized that the world didn't owe him second chances, and that every careless decision had consequences he could no longer escape. For the first time he understood the weight of the trust he had squandered, the family, the money, the love. And yet the realization came too late. The house was gone, the friends were gone, and the brother who had once saved him was far away, building a life he could no longer touch. Obinna was left to face the consequences of his actions, alone and desperate. One busy afternoon at the clinic, Kayamika was reviewing patient files when a familiar, unwelcome voice called her name. She looked up and froze. Obinna stood there, looking older and wearier, his fancy clothes gone, replaced by rumpled shirts and tired shoes. His eyes, once full of charm, now held desperation. "Kayamika, please," he said, his voice almost breaking. "I've made a mess of everything. I know I've hurt you. I've learned my lesson. I really have. I need your help. Please forgive me." Kayamika felt her chest tighten. The brother who had thrown her out, who had ruined her trust, now stood before her, begging for a second chance. She remembered the sleepless nights, the money she had given, the land she had mortgaged, all for him. The memories burned fresh in her mind, and yet part of her wanted to believe him, wanted to see the boy she once protected and loved. Obinna's hand shook as he extended them, pleading. "I'll do anything," he said. "I'll change. Just don't turn me away." Kayamika stepped back, her mind racing. She could see the pain in his face, but she also remembered the betrayal. Her heart ached, torn between love and caution. This was the moment she had dreaded, choosing between the brother she had once saved and the wisdom that told her not to repeat the past. She looked at him, searching for the man he claimed to be, wondering if he was truly ready to change. Kayamika stood in the clinic, looking at Obinna. Part of her wanted to rush forward, forgive him, and help him the way she always had. But another part of her remembered the cold morning he had thrown her out, the lies he spread, and the years of struggle she had endured because of him. Her heart ached, torn between love for her brother and the pain of his betrayal. She took a deep breath and spoke slowly, her voice steady. "Obinna, I will help you, but not the way you want. I can treat your injuries, care for your health, make sure you recover. But I won't give you money to waste again. I won't feed the greed in your heart." His face fell, disbelief and shame flickering across it. "But I need," he began, but she held up her hand. "No," she said firmly. "I'll heal the wounds of your body, Obinna, but I won't feed the greed of your heart. You must learn to stand on your own now. I've saved you once. I will not save you a second time with money or favors that will destroy you again." For the first time, Obinna was silent. He realized she meant every word. Kayamika offered him care, compassion and guidance, but she refused to repeat the mistakes of the past. It was the hardest decision she had ever made, but she knew it was right. She could love him without letting him take advantage of her again. In that moment, she felt a quiet strength settle inside her. She was no longer just a sister, she was a woman who knew her worth. Years later, Kayamika stood on a grand stage at an international healthcare awards event, the bright lights reflecting off the polished floor. Her clinic, which had started as a small, struggling space in Ghana, now had branches across several countries, serving thousands of patients and employing dozens of young nurses she had mentored herself. As she stepped up to the podium, she looked out at the crowd, doctors, philanthropists, and leaders from around the world, and shared her journey. She spoke about the long nights, the sacrifices, and the moments when she felt completely alone. She didn't hide the pain of betrayal, of being used by the person she had loved most. But she framed it as the fire that had pushed her forward, the force that had given her strength to rise higher than she ever imagined. Her voice shook at first, then steadied as she delivered the words that had become her truth. "He took me out of his house, but I built a world where he has no place unless he changes." The audience erupted in applause, not just for her success, but for her resilience, her courage, and her refusal to let betrayal define her life. Kayamika smiled, knowing that every struggle had led her to this moment, and that she had finally turned pain into power.